Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 21st of December 2023. I'm going to absolutely romp through the video today because I am doing this before I have to rush up towards London for my boy, as he has some rugby trial job going on. Anyway, whatever, let's get to where we normally start, the aid section for this second video. So there's another round of consultations that was held yesterday between Ukraine and Great Britain. Great Britain seem to be doing an awful lot at the moment behind the scenes as far as we can work out. I quite often get criticised by people, oh, you don't have a go at UK enough and you concentrate so much in the US. And the reason why is because the US is, in real terms, the most important. It's the biggest GDP, biggest aid supplier. It is the cornerstone of NATO, etc., etc. All of these reasons are why I focus so much on the US. And when I don't criticize the UK enough, it's partly because they are just consistently, rhetorically, and in other ways behind Ukraine. And the difference in the UK and US is that it doesn't matter who wins the next election in the UK. So it's looking like it's going to be the opposition Labour Party that should, I mean, if you're looking at the polls in a moment, they should romp through the next election. As far as we can work out, there will be no change at all in the approach to Ukraine. There is such strong bipartisan support from UK politicians, from both parties, from all the major parties, that, do you know what, it's not an issue. The Ukraine aid will be consistent, and whether it's Grant Shapps or whoever in position as Defence Secretary, and there will be the same level of rhetoric and the same level, hopefully, of action supporting Ukraine. So that's why I don't concentrate so much on UK political positioning. What the UK could do more of is, I mean, we don't have enough stuff in our cupboards, and that's what America has vastly over countries like the UK, is that they have spent decades and decades spending huge amounts of cash on their defence. Whereas the UK and other European nations in times of peace as well have done less of that. And so we have very bare cupboards when it comes to giving equipment. So the UK really needs to step up in terms of defence spending, and there are some issues there. We are the 5th or 6th richest country in the world. We need to make sure that we are paying our way in terms of defence in order that we satisfy NATO conditions, but also, which we do, but in order to actually have a functioning armed services that can react adequately to anything that goes on around the world, or at least to most things, rather than scrabbling around and robbing Peter to pay Paul, or using the same sort of squadrons to fly over there, and then we're going to pull them to fly over here, and then we're going to pull them to fly over there, rather than being able to rotate. We just don't have enough. We need to spend an awful lot on defence. Anyway, that's a whole other debate, right? But it appears to be doing things behind the scenes in terms of maritime support for Ukraine. There's this getting together with Norway for a maritime coalition. And here's another round of coalitions between the UK and Ukraine regarding the conclusion of bilateral agreement on the provision of security guarantees as provided for in the joint declaration on support for Ukraine. So more stuff happening in the background. That's good news. A minister has said that Ukraine has already produced 50,000 FPV drones in December, and that's what I reported earlier. Ukraine has already produced 50,000 FPV drones, according to Alexander Kamishin. He's a guy with a top knot that came over from the railways. He's doing a really good job in ramping up production right across the board for indigenous machinery and munitions. That's good news. And there were announcements yesterday that they're going to produce 1 million drones next year. Czech Association Skupina D, of which its patron is Czech Army General Karel Reka, wants to provide 10,000 FPV drones to the Ukrainian army. In the coming days, they will launch a public fundraiser called Nemesis to provide the necessary funds. That's absolutely brilliant. Great support from Czechia there. And Ukraine, or from at least the people in Czechia, the Ukrainian Cobra drone is now being mass produced. I did talk about this the other day. It's got sort of riveted, it's a metal drone. The cost of the Cobra is about $2,000, which is cheaper than foreign or Ukrainian analogs. It has a range of 300 kilometers and a load capacity of 15 kilograms. looks fairly useful. It can, because of how it's made, it can be mass produced. So that's the useful thing there. Right, Latvia plans to train 3,500 soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces next year. According to their media outlets, that is ramping up their training. The Baltics are doing such a marvellous job of supporting in as many ways as they can. Ukraine will receive 50 ambulances from the UAE, United Arab Emirates. The Ministry of Health reports the transfer takes place with the assistance of the Embassy of Ukraine in the UAE. The first batch of 14 ambulances has already been delivered. That's fantastic there. Ukraine receives over $160 million in grants from the EU. Ukraine received 150 million euros, which is $164.5 million in EU grants under the support to Ukraine's fast recovery financing agreements. Fantastic. You know, they are needing money, aren't they, for all sorts of things. The European Innovation Council is to allocate 20 million euros to support Ukrainian deep tech developments, according to the Ministry of Digital Transformation. Thanks to the project, about 200 Ukrainian startups can receive grant funding. Good news, especially since that is one of the core industries for the Ukrainians. Germany is providing Ukraine with a further 88.5 million euros via the Energy Support Fund. Ukraine uses this fund to finance energy sources, spare parts, and equipment such as transformers and generators, which will help to maintain Ukraine's energy supply. A further portion of the funds will be used for green energy transition projects such as photovoltaic systems on public buildings and the green reconstruction of Ukraine. Someone was privately messaging me who's an expert in green energy production, and he was saying there's a real, and we talked about this a lot before, the real opportunity to, as the world, to move away from hydrocarbons. And you can talk about it for environmental reasons, but actually you can talk about it for energy security reasons just as strongly. And if the world was to move away from hydrocarbons to other sources that you could indigenously produce, such as, the wave, tidal, hydro, there's so much hydro capacity in the world that is not being harnessed. And solar and wind, which are part of the mix now. And I know there's like up and down, and you know, they're not as consistent all the time, all through the year and all through the day. You put all of these into the mix, you can wean yourself off hydrocarbons. Yes, for environmental reasons, which is super important. But also, you are going to denude Russia of their ability to generate income for their dictatorial and imperialistic romps into neighboring countries. It's just they are making their money off hydrocarbons. Let's get off hydrocarbons. Because if the world moves on from hydrocarbons, then Russia is left going, well, how are we going to finance our evil ways? Just so important that we just stop burning coal and oil and gas so that Russia stops making so much money. That to me is like the strongest argument. Anyway, in this related press release today, the German Foreign Office announced that Germany will provide Ukraine with a total of over 1.6 billion euros in development, military and humanitarian aid this winter. That's excellent. So Germany really, coming up with the goods there. Two things straight off the bat from them. Germany are standing up with increasing, with increasing strength to Russia's regime in their assistance to Ukraine. It's great to see. And actually, I get a sense that and I can't speak to his financial and military assistance to Ukraine, because I think it is often kept under the radar, really, under the bonnet. But Emmanuel Macron is saying an awful lot, and very publicly at the moment. And also, even when Zelensky was announcing in his press conference how much money everyone's giving them around the world next year, how much he's got in the pipeline, there was $2 billion from France, and that, as far as I'm aware, that's not been announced. So we very easily slag off France in terms of what aid they haven't given. But my sense, as I've said many times, is they are doing stuff. You just don't know about it. They don't like to announce things. However, they are the second biggest military exporter in the world. And you would expect, and I keep saying this, they used to be the third, and someone had a go at me. It's like, Russia are definitely the second biggest. Like, how much have they exported in the last year? I don't think that they're going to be fulfilling any orders really going forward. And apparently, all the news reports are saying that they are been catastrophic the last year for their arms exports for obvious reasons, right? They need everything they can build. So I don't think for a moment that Russia are the second biggest arms exporter in the world anymore. And I would put probably France there. So that's my speculation. So that's why I keep saying that. But they are the second biggest or third biggest in the world. So you would expect them to play a major part in supporting Ukraine. There is, I would argue, a lot more France could do. Probably, but I don't know how much they are doing, so it's really difficult to make those assumptions. But it's great to hear Zelensky and Colonna and others being very strong on the rhetoric at the moment, and just keeping it in the public eye. This is why this is important. If he's on TV, like, this is one of my big criticisms of UK politics, is that Rishi Sunak kind of goes, who's our prime minister, kind of goes, foreign diplomacy stuff. I'll leave that to, I don't know, Cameron, you can come do that. We'll make you a lord, whatever. Come on, David Cameron. Yeah, I know in Europe you're pretty unpopular because Brexit, and I know in Britain you're pretty unpopular because Brexit. But anyway, come on, right? You're gonna do this, okay? That means I don't have to talk about Ukraine and other foreign things, isn't it? Brilliant. Right, let's get on with talking about, I don't know, the Treasury or something. But Rishi Sunak is not cool like that, whereas Macron and Scholz at the moment are being very strong on their rhetoric, very publicly, in support of Ukraine. Slovakia will block Ukraine's accession to NATO because it would mean the start of World War III, the country's Prime Minister Robert Fico has said. We said before the election that it would be a problem for us if it comes to Ukraine's membership of NATO. I believe it will never happen. As long as I have the opportunity to influence the Slovak political scene, I'll use a right to veto such a decision. This is obviously very worrying. However, I wouldn't worry too much because I think NATO accession for Ukraine is going to be some way off down the line. They're never going to be able to do that while they are at war. And Robert Fico's probably won't be, in charge of Slovakia by the time that it comes around to actually taking place. I can't see that accession's going to start really kicking in those processes and mechanisms for another couple of years at the least. So that is annoying, and it does show you where Robert Fico is. And that to me would be a massive worry for NATO. If I was Jens Stoltenberg, I'd be like, what do we do? In the same way that the EU must be thinking, what do we do with Viktor Orban? And to a degree, Robert Fico. NATO must be thinking, what do we do with people like Fico? And indeed, Viktor Orban. It is a massive challenge, but possibly not quite as bad or as imminent as one might think as far as being a problem. So US announces new sanctions to tighten Russian oil price cap. This is really good. The US Secretary announced on December the 20th new sanctions targeting companies shipping Russian oil, building upon earlier measures to tighten the $60 per barrel price cap. And yeah, those are the loopholes that need to be tightened, because the price cap was a really good thing and it was working really well, and then it's slightly slipped. Luckily, the price of oil has dropped anyway, mainly because, as far as I can work out, the US has been flooding the market with oil against OPEC. So OPEC have been trying to cut supply to try and boost Russia's income, or at least to make themselves more money, whatever, to get the price per barrel up. And the US has their riposte has been to flood the market to get the price down, and it seems that the US has had more success than OPEC, and that I think is ultimately really good news for hammering. So not only are Russia restricting their production or their supply of barrels to the world market, so they're not making as much money because they're not selling as many barrels as they would normally, in an attempt to get the price up, so that they kind of overcome that. Selling less, but selling then at a greater price. So in the end, we like, the idea would be that they make more money, or as much money. So they're selling fewer barrels, and then the US is flooding the market, and so the price per barrel is also down. So those two things together are a double whammy for Russia. Right, if I wasn't in such a rush to go, I would give you a 20-minute rant on this. This really annoys me. Like, I am angry. Like, I hate I hate Mike Johnson anyway. For what he's done in his rhetoric about, I mean, he's slimy. He sort of says things about you, positive things towards Ukraine, but actions speak louder than words. And his actions have been very much not help Ukraine. Why is the southern border stuff being attached to Ukraine? Why is it not being attached to any other bit of policy in US politics? And I am going to mention this because this is freaking important. So, a group of Russian nationals were able to donate to newly elected House Speaker Mike Johnson's campaign in 2018 by funneling the money through a US company. So, okay, it's 5 years ago, but he has taken a whole bunch of money from Russia, essentially. It's that simple. It's that simple. There is Russian money in American politics meddling with the system. A group of Russian nationals were able to donate to newly elected House Speaker Mike Johnson's campaign in 2018 by funneling money through a US company. The Texas-based American ethane company previously donated tens of thousands of dollars to the campaigns of Louisiana Republicans, including Johnson, who was voted by the House to replace Republican Kevin McCarthy as Speaker, following 3 weeks of GOP chaos in the lower chamber. So this is actually an article from back in October, but I missed this one. While American Ethane was run in 2018 by American John Hautala, 88% of the firm was owned by 3 Russian nationals. Konstantin Nikolaev, someone I've mentioned before, he's not a good dude. Mikhail Yuriev and Andrei Kunatbev. Johnson's previous Russian campaign donations had been brought up as people criticized the Republican following his election as House Speaker, a position which is second in line to the presidency behind the Vice President. I mean, goodness me, he's like third in line to the presidency, and he is compromised as far as I'm concerned. And he's already had, previous Russian campaign donations have been brought up. So one of the men behind the company, Nikolaev, an oligarch with close ties to Putin, has also found to have financially backed Maria Butina, a Russian citizen who lived in Washington, D.C. Butina was sentenced to 18 months in prison in 2019 after admitting to acting as an unregistered foreign agent to infiltrate conservative political groups and influence foreign policy to Russia's benefit before and after the 2016 election. So she has been put in prison for meddling in a 2016 election on behalf of Russia. And she's funding, she's linked to the funding, or at least the person who funded her also funded Johnson. And there's other information, but I'm going to join it here. It is against federal law for a campaign to knowingly accept donations from foreign-owned corporation, a foreign national, or a company owned or controlled by foreign nationals. A Federal Election Commission investigation ruled in 2022 that American Ethane made political campaign contributions using funds, and this is it, using funds derived from loans from foreign entities ultimately owned by Russian nationals, and that American Ethane had, quote, zero domestic funds available to make those contributions. In other words, none of that money that went through an American company came from America. Zero funds, zero domestic funds were made available for that. That money came from Russia, and it went to Republican candidates. In a scathing letter, 2 FEC commissioners, Democrats Shana M. Broussard and Ellen L. Weintraub, condemned their Republican colleagues after the agency only fined American Ethane a $9,500 civil penalty. Oh, whoop-de-doo, for donating to GOP candidates in Louisiana in 2018, despite being almost entirely owned by Russian nationals. That's all you do. Why have they got away with that? They should be off ski. Though American Ethane did pay a civil penalty, it was a slap on the wrist and it failed to account for a violation of one of the most fundamental provisions entrusted to this commission to enforce, wrote Broussard and Weintraub. I'd agree. Quote, one can only hope that in future cases the commission will once again muster the political will to work together to wall off our elections from the malign influence of foreign money. I've just written about disinformation and about the trouble we're having dealing with disinformation and Russian narratives and foreign narratives. It's hard enough dealing with stuff like that without having to look to your own, in this case in the US, your own checks and balances not being strong enough. This is just not robust enough. A $9,500 fine is pathetic. If that's what you're going to do to wall off elections from the malign influence of foreign money, then, well, that's giving the Russians free rein to say, okay, well, that didn't quite work. Let's try it again here. Because, what's $9,500 when you're talking about, US elections? And it gets worse. So the BBC Verify, which is a really cool thing that the BBC do. But say what you like about the BBC. If you're someone in the UK that doesn't want to pay license fees or whatever, BBC Verify is cool. So these are the fact checking. This is a fact checking arm of the BBC that work really hard, and these are the guys that just found 800 TikTok accounts that were Russian accounts, and the disinformation there. That actually was one of the things that inspired me to write this piece on disinformation and technology and AI and whatnot. So go and read that. But they have found that the pro-Russian yacht propaganda influenced the US debate over Ukraine aid. This is, again, super bloody troubling. Right, a website founded by a former US Marine who now lives in Russia has fueled a rumor that Zelensky purchased 2 luxury yachts with American aid money. I've had that on my threads, people talking about that on my threads. Despite the false claim, the disinformation plot was successful. It took off online and was echoed by members of the US Congress making crucial decisions about military spending. It was an incredible assertion. Using 2 advisors as proxies, Mr. Zelensky paid $75 million for 2 yachts, supposedly. But not only has the Ukrainian government flatly denied the story, the 2 ships in question have not even been sold. It was just completely fake. Despite being false, the story reached members of the US Congress, where leaders say any decision to further aid to Ukraine will be delayed until next year. Some are vehemently opposed to further support. On Twitter, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene said, quote, anyone who votes to fund Ukraine is funding the most corrupt money scheme of any foreign war in our country's history. And she linked to the story containing the yacht rumor. Tom Tillis, a Republican senator and a supporter of military aid to Ukraine, spoke to CNN shortly after senators held a closed-door meeting with Mr. Zelensky last week. Quote, I think the notion of corruption came up because some have said that we can't do it because people will buy yachts with the money, Mr. Tillis said. Quote, Mr. Zelensky disabused people of those notions. So in the debate in Congress about funding, people were bringing this up. Mr. Tillis has butted heads with another Republican senator, J.D. Vance, who also mentioned Mr. Zelensky and ships in the same breath. While discussing budget priorities on a podcast hosted by former Donald Trump advisor Steve Bannon, Mr. Vance said, quote, there are people who would cut Social Security, throw our grandparents into poverty. Why? So that one of Zelensky's ministers can buy a bigger yacht. Although the yacht rumour is false, the BBC has discovered the story was given a major boost by a Russia-linked website that pretends to be located in Washington. It is, researchers say, a likely purpose-built tool for narrative laundering with links to the Russian government. I love that term, narrative laundering. And this is DC Weekly. So DC Weekly, and it goes on to talk about DC Weekly and the starting of this website, and it's a fake website, and blah, 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 blah. And it's all the money involved, and this is a really good bit of journalism. But it's also worth remembering this one, and I've had to deal with this as well from people on my threads. In October, a widely shared claim on social media stated that President Zelensky's wife, this is like, was it Pom G and Nikos G, these people on these Russian shills on my threads, I just want to ban them because like you are spreading disinformation, and they were coming up with this, and it's like, that's not good enough, mate. That is A1 bollocks, and it is not cool that you are actively spreading that on my threads. In October, a widely shared claim on social media stated that President Zelensky's wife spent a fortune on jewelry in New York while the Ukrainian president was in the city speaking to the UN. Like the yacht rumor, the claim originated on a YouTube channel with very few followers and just one video. The video featured a woman who said she is from Benin. She claimed to work at Cartier on New York's Fifth Avenue. The woman showed a receipt dated 22nd September and Mrs. Zelensky's name on it, and a bill for $1.1 million for a bracelet, earrings, and a necklace. Facial recognition tools threw up a close match between the woman in the video and photos from social media profiles of a woman who lives in St. Petersburg in Russia. When we looked at the pictures of the woman, it appeared to be the same person as the one on the YouTube video. The story went viral on Facebook, TikTok, and Telegram. Russia's UK Embassy X account shared it with the comment, best use of UK taxpayers' money ever. But the receipt is a clear fake. By September the 21st, Mr. and Mrs. Zelensky had left New York and travelled to Canada. One English language site was instrumental in spreading the rumour, DC Weekly. BBC Verify and Clemson researchers found a number of DC Weekly articles posted between August and December this year followed the same patterns. They falsely accused Prince Andrew of making a secret visit to Ukraine, and that Ukraine provided weapons to Hamas, that an American non-profit organization harvested organs in Ukraine, and that Zelensky's administration allowed Western companies to use Ukrainian farmland for disposal of toxic waste. Stories on DC Weekly were often published within days after allegations first appeared on YouTube, and so on and so forth. This worries the heck out of me. And the fact that US politicians are taking their information off these websites or off Twitter. Like, I take a lot of my information off Twitter, but I know how to use it, and I know how to... I curate sources that I trust, right? And if they are found to be wanting, then I will lose them as sources, as I have done previously. But if you're going to just take any old crap off Twitter and then go into a meeting in Congress, a closed-door meeting, and spout that crap and give that as a reason not to give funding to Ukraine, then you shouldn't be a bloody politician. You do not have the wherewithal to do the very important work you are doing. It is despicable that people can be influenced by outright falsehoods, obvious falsehoods, without wanting to check them. And then they go and wreak havoc in Congress that's destabilizing global security. Gee whiz. JD Vance, do one. Marjorie Taylor Greene, do one. You are not cool. And while you're at it, Mike Johnson, do one. And here, like this, getting into Canada, Russia is committing genocide, and this is the garbage we need to deal with. So this is from the Toronto Sun. I presume this is some kind of tabloid that is, I don't know, pro Russia in some kind of way. But I mean, this is like, what, 3 elements of propaganda do we have here? So 1, insulting Ukrainian dignity during their existential struggle for survival. 2, perpetuating anti-Semitic stereotypes. The large nose, Zelensky's Jewish, and he's taking money, and that's Biden there. Perpetuate anti-Semitic stereotypes. And 3, advance Putin's propaganda efforts, all in one cartoon. Really slick. Just, why? This is good news. So the Polish government has dismissed the heads of state media outlets. And the reason they've done that is because the previous government, under the Law and Justice Party, had basically, and this is one of the criticisms from the EU, and this is one of the criticisms of Viktor Orban's Hungary, is that he has people in all the media positions that are in his pocket. And that was the same with the last government in Poland, and now they've all been dismissed, and that's really good news. The new government of Donald Tusk has dismissed the leadership of state media, accusing them of propaganda for the Law and Justice Party, which lost power in the last parliamentary elections. The leaders of public TV channel TVP, Polish radio, and Polish press agency were fired. News TV channel TVP has already stopped broadcasting. The channel's website was shut down. This is what Poland's new pro-European government decided to restore the legitimacy and impartiality of the official media, which in their estimation had turned into a propaganda unit of the former ruling Law and Justice Party. So it'd be interesting to see where it goes. You would assume that they're going to put all the checks and balances in place to make sure that the people given those positions are more independent, in a way that the EU would expect in terms of their kind of transparency rulings and whatnot. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that one in there too. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. Sorry it might have been rushed. Apology for the rant. Sorry, not sorry. I don't apologise at all, because, man, I hate disinformation. I hate it. And when that infiltrates our political cloisters, and, the virus of mistruth is so active in the veins of our political bodies, things are worrying. That gets me worried. And when decisions are made in the most important government in the world, that can be traced back in part to Russian, like very obvious Russian disinformation projects. We got to be worried, and we need to do something about this. Like, this is a wake up call, another wake up call. How many do we need before serious action takes place? And what would that actually look like? I talk about fact checking, live fact checking, and the use of AI to help us. what else can be done? Anyway, enough, Pierce. You need to go to London. Take care, everybody. Speak soon, or not too soon, but later.